is really nice to meet you, Aaron. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Um, Guitar Lessons is a wonderful film, and I was wondering what was it that made you want to tell this story?
Well, it's just my life. This one, I mean, this is very personal to me. So this is where I grew up, and this is the people I grew up among and amongst, and these are yeah, this is home for me. So like my first film, Hank Williams' First Nation, which was personal and very local and germane to my community and my youth. This film is the same, and during the pandemic, and I found myself back home. I've been living in the States a lot for the last several years, and I found myself at home without much to do, and some friends in the north thought it would be fun to make a movie, and so it was that kind of freedom and whim that just allowed us to do whatever we wanted. And when you leave uh, me alone with some friends to do whatever we want, this is the kind of thing that falls out.
That's fair. Well, I mean, that's interesting. So I didn't realize that this is this the type of environment you grew up in, or the same area you grew up in?
Yeah, both. So these are my people. I grew up on a little farm, maybe 100 miles from where we shot this film,
Mm.
and some of the people involved with making it are old neighbors of mine, and so I know these characters very well. And the Ray, the character that Corb Lund plays, is a neighbor and an uncle and a friend, and these are and the kids that, Leland. Not only was he inspired by a real kid, the 15-year-old boy in the film was inspired by a kid that I know as a school teacher. I just know these kids, and I know this language. I've always loved the Cree language, and spent a lot of time among Cree and Métis people, and so this yeah, this is my wheelhouse. I know this film.
Mm. It shows. The film feels very personal, I will say. I was wondering about Corb. What was it that you saw in him that he could bring to lead the film into this role?
Well, Corb's a friend. He's a great guy, and he's a great artist. He's um I mean, he's a star, and we he gets a lot of respect. But sometimes I think that um, we don't know or appreciate what a serious. He's got a lot of goofy songs, and of course, so sometimes it's our goofy work that gets more attention. But if you dig into Corb's catalog, he's a poet and
Mm.
he's an artist. But beyond that, he is a consummate professional. He's the only one, and I started in the arts and entertainment as a musician, and so I know lots of musicians and have worked with lots of musicians. I don't know anyone kind of at Corb Lund's level who still takes guitar lessons for his own personal betterment. He's the kind of guy who gets up at 8 o'clock in the morning and works for 2 or 3 hours on his songwriting before going for a run. He's a consummate professional. He takes his work very seriously, and always had a genuine interest in acting and in theater, beyond film, but in theater. And this weekend he's doing something with the theater group in Alberta, and so what was the question? Corb is a friend, and he's a great artist, and I knew he had an interest in acting and had studied acting in New York City with David Mamet. So Corb's had small parts in things I've done before. He played the cop in a little movie I made in Bakersfield, and when I reached out to him with this to play the lead in really carry the film, he stuck his neck out, and I'm pretty sure his management told him, "Don't even think about it. Don't do this." But he did, and we all appreciate it. He did a great job, and he brought a lot of energy and attention to the film. That's been great for us.
He really does. He's sort of the soul of the film in a lot of ways. Um, uh, One of the other things that, of course, the film I mean, it's right in the title, but the guitar. This film is very much, an affectionate love letter to the guitar itself in some ways. And I was wondering, for you, why the guitar? Why this specific instrument, um,
Yeah.
to make the sort of the centerpiece of the film?
Yeah, again, it's highly personal, Steve. From a boy crawling around on the floor, my dad had a record and my mom had a record, right? As growing up on the farm, my dad's record was 24 Great Truck Driving Songs by the uh, K-Tel's 24 Great Truck Driving Songs, and my mom's record was Elvis Presley GI Blues. So that's what I just sat there and watched going round and round on the turntable. So guitar became, I just dreamed of guitars. And as soon as I sold a 4-H calf, my first 4-H calf I sold, I phoned Simpson Sears, and I must have been 12 at the time. And amazingly, in those days, you could order something COD and pay for it when it arrived at the post office in Dixonville, Alberta. So they did. They let a 12-year-old order an electric guitar and an amplifier COD, and it showed up. Not to my surprise, but to my parents' surprise. But I sold my calf. I sold Brutus. My beef calf had gone to the auction, and I had the cash to pay COD. So I went home with a Sunburst Stratocaster and a Mel Bay book on how to play the guitar, and I just played that thing for 2 years before someone took me aside, or a year and a half before someone came by and showed me how to tune it. So I can't imagine what it sounded like upstairs for those first year and a half. I didn't even know how to tune it. But the guitar, so that's how important the guitar is to me. I had an uncle who played the guitar, and he was a hero of mine. And guitar players have always been heroes of mine. I moved to Austin, Texas for 4 years and worked in the music industry down there and got to know some of the greats. And Corb and I share love not only for guitar playing and for music, but for the instrument itself. And yeah, you see some of that in the film.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because the film sort of builds up to the guitar lessons. It's funny with the title "Guitar Lessons." You think it's gonna, after that first meeting, you're like, "All right, we're gonna get right into it," but no, he's got to earn those lessons, and um, which I actually really like about the film because it adds significance to them. And you know what I think is so interesting though about these moments is the mentoring relationship or the relationship between men in this film is fascinating to me. And even down to that scene near the end where I forget the characters' names, but the two gentlemen are sitting around the fire, and one of them's opening up about his addiction. And he says it's dangerous to ask a man for advice or something to that effect. Um, but it seems like it's difficult for men to engage in these sorts of big conversations. I was wondering, why do you think that's so tough for us?
Wow, no one's asked me that a question like that, or even brought that up to my awareness, and I appreciate it. It's a bit of a tough time to be a man, and there's good reasons for that. So one of the things that, and I think as someone who grew up on a farm and grew up in the north and rural communities, and now has been living in places like Los Angeles and Austin for years, and become rather cityfied and urbanized myself. Yeah, you bring up an interesting question. It is tricky to know what to do with masculinity and with the patriarchy in some kind of positive way. We've spent a lot of time, understandably and rightly so, talking about the negative aspects of the patriarchy and the toxic aspects of masculinity. And still it's there, and it's not always toxic, and it's not always negative, and there's something and it's something we need to deal with and to navigate, and there's something about rural people, rural men, and there's something about indigenous men, Cree men, who I think maybe have a handle on that manhood in a way that we in the city we urbanites are struggling to grasp. And so I've never really thought about it, and I'm thinking on the spot now, and I appreciate it. But I like that scene where and the relationship between nephew and uncle is important. The relationship between Ernie and Bruiser, and he goes and he asks a man for advice because he's struggling with addiction, and the relationship between the boss and the employee are two men, and then the relationship with the guitar teacher, and really, and the boy who's looking for guitar lessons. And really, it's a story about a 15-year-old and a 50-year-old. Both of them are learning to grow up together over the guitar lessons, right? And not to say that there aren't some powerful and interesting women in the film, and examples of the matriarchy, and I love it when Cookham beats up Ernie and throws her moccasin rubber at her. And I love Denise's strength, Ray's girlfriend, and Ernie's new girlfriend are strong and interesting women characters in the film. But to answer your question, I guess, all stories are explorations, and that's one of the things that the film explores, and a nod to rural and indigenous and agrarian cultures for having, when they have it right, can have a good grasp on masculinity and manhood.
Absolutely, and like you said, that scene is actually my favorite one of the film. It's just these two men wondering how to communicate with one another, and how they can help one another. I mean, that, as you said, there's multiple scenes, and the women in this film are absolutely wonderful as well. This is not to take away from anything there, but there does seem to be this sort of struggle to get to that deeper emotional core with one another and share, which I think is beautiful, especially in that moment.
I like that. So now I'm pontificating. You got me thinking. But I like the scene with the Ray and Leland in the boat, and Ray, I think he kind of says it all for himself when he says, and sometimes we didn't have choking myself up. Sometimes we didn't have anyone to teach us better, right? Yeah. He says to the boy when they're talking about, he's trying to teach the boy about the 3 types of women. Sometimes, he's obviously a grown man who's trying to figure out how to grow up. He's one of us who didn't have anyone to teach us any better as we go along, and we need to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Aaron, the film's a joy. I'm just wondering from you, what do you hope people take away from it?
Well, it's been a great. I just want, when I made the first film, what do I hope people take away from it? Is the question. When I made my first film, Hank Williams First Nation, and we played at a northern theater with a largely Cree audience in High Prairie, Alberta, and I went up there, and at the end of the audience loved it, and like they loved guitar lessons. And a lot of people have said how guitar lessons is kind of like Hank Williams First Nation Part 2, a bit of a sequel, and it is, and it isn't, but it is in a way. At the end of Hank Williams, a big old grandma, Cookham, Cree woman, came up to me and gave me a bear hug and lifted me off the ground and put me back down. And she said, I'm 78 years old. That's the first time in my life I've seen my language, my people, and my land up on the big screen. My language, my people, and my land up on the big screen. And she thanked me for that. So I've never forgotten that. And I think that's the thing one of the things that I most like about audiences going away from guitar lessons is it's just the joy that they've had to see themselves, because we seldom here in the prairies anyway, we seldom see ourselves up on the big screen, and we're always watching, somebody from far away on the big screen. So to see our own people in our own language and our own land, and we Alberta gets to play Alberta in this film, and that's a particular joy. Beyond that, we've had wonderful emails or letters from people who said, that this has inspired them to work on their addiction problems. We've had, letters from people who it's inspired me to pick up the guitar again. So those kind of things. And it's been a nice thing to bring us together. And I want to take it to a larger audience now and see Beyond the Prairies. Looking forward to that on February 24th, seeing how it plays elsewhere in the world.
I appreciate that. Aaron, thank you so much. I really appreciate your candor and your openness, and thanks for sharing with us today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Anytime. Have a great day.
Don't worry, like you never